Hello, Leigh. Good morning.
Hello. I come bearing some of the most joyful news I've heard in a long time.
Oh my God, please share.
Are you aware
Probably not.
that in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants,
Yes.
America Ferrera's negligent father who she goes to stay with
Yes.
is Bradley Whitford?
No. I'm what?
Yeah. I just love the idea that Josh Lyman aged into becoming America Ferrera's deadbeat dad who left her to go off and have a white family.
Oh my God, it is him. That's such amazing information.
I just thought it honestly blew my mind because I always knew that Bradley Whitford looked so familiar, but I couldn't place what else I'd ever seen him in.
Leigh.
The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
And the thing is he was on a really highbrow TV show for a really long time. And then it's just important that he's continued to make really important artistic choices.
Kind of cultural touchstone work.
Honestly, I love the fact that he was like, I was Josh Lyman in The West Wing. And then the call comes through and they're like, do you want to be in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants? And he's like, absolutely.
I believe in this America Ferrera. I will be her father.
Yeah. You know what? I think she's going places. What a way to start. As you can tell, I am still with cold. So the register's dropped even lower than it was before. And there will be points in this episode where the huskiness will just be next level, Leigh.
Yes. I will say we both watched this episode last night and we did record some fun gut initial reactions for our patrons, which are going live on Patreon. They will already have been live on Patreon for a while by the time this episode comes out. But it's really important, dear listener, if you're considering joining our Patreon, just to know that Fi watched Two Cathedrals for the first time, 2 glasses of wine and 2 margaritas deep with no dinner. So those gut reaction voice notes are iconic.
I listened to them back in the cold light of day this morning and I was like, wow. I was trashed. There is one voice note I sent to Leigh, which is just me sobbing.
Yeah, it really, if I didn't know you better, it would make me seriously concerned for your mental health. But having lived with you for basically a decade, I'm like, no, that's a Tuesday. That's fine.
Yeah, I had a Friday night off work and I was like, I'm going to have a little glass of wine when I finish. And then I'm just going to head home. I'm just going to do my podcast prep. And then a couple of my colleagues were like, let's just have another glass of wine. And then suddenly someone was like, I actually feel like a margarita would be amazing. And I was like, do you know what? Actually, it would. Surviving off literally 2 pieces of toast, a banana and a sandwich. And I'm like, yeah, I'll have 2 margaritas. What was I thinking? Anyway, my drinking habits aside, welcome back, listeners, to Queer Gals Watch the West Wing.
Seriously, though, is there anything better than being with work colleagues and having had the kind of sociable one drink and then the absolute joy and silliness of being like, are we going to have another? Are we gonna actually have fun together? Oh my God, wow.
It was amazing. And also at one point, someone was like, I've got a packet of cigarettes. And we were all like, fuck, let's go outside and smoke a cigarette.
Because much like Jed Bartlet, you love a cheeky cig.
Love a cheeky cig. It's raining, we're under a bus shelter.
Kids.
Don't smoke, kids. Bad, boo, big tobacco. But yeah, it was an absolutely delightful evening. And I came home, watched this episode, and absolutely smashed some spicy peanut noodles. And was living, just sending Leigh outrageous voice notes. We are here, of course, to get down to the brass tacks of episode 22 of season 2 of The West Wing, Two Cathedrals.
And this was an episode title. Out of all of the episode titles, this was an episode title that I had heard referred to as a big ep.
Yeah. People had mentioned oh, have you done Two Cathedrals yet? And I was like, wow, I actually considered it quite a lame title. But it truly bangs.
It bangs.
when you know the significance of the two cathedrals,
Yeah.
then you're like, I'm with you, I'm here now.
Yeah.
Leigh, shall we just crack on?
Let's just dive in. A small PSA that we are not going to do. We've just felt, we both watched this episode last night. We're not going to do a study session this week because we just already knew from watching the episode that we were just going to have too much to chat about. So we are just, for the season finale, purely going to focus on the episode itself.
You're welcome. There's a real like Muttley style kind of laugh going on today, which I'm enjoying. We'll see how that progresses. So the previously on Leigh is popping us straight back in that hot bubbling water of the last episode.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? Where do we go politically? Where do we go professionally? And where do we go personally with the loss of Mrs Landingham?
Most importantly, where do we go spiritually?
Oh, Lord knows. Quite literally. That's where we're going this episode.
We are, in the words of Hosier, being taken to church.
We are being taken to church. But we do open in, let's say, terse meeting with Leo and two men.
Who are these men? I don't care about them. I want to be back in the action. These men are irrelevant and they're kind of annoying.
Are they senators? Are they congressmen? They're certainly dinosaurs. Thank you. It's top quality, top tier comedy coming at you through your ears.
However, I am loving how baller Leo is being in this meeting already.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like Margaret's bustling in and out. They're doing like paperwork while these two old men are just like moaning at him, telling him things he already knows.
And I just loved so much when the senator goes, I don't like being the first one to say it, but I'm gonna. I think the president has to strongly consider not running for re-election. And then Leo just like, he thinks he's done like a mic drop. Like he thinks that he's like said the crazy thing. And then Leo just goes, you think you're the first one to say it? You are at minimum the 35th in the last 2 hours.
Wow. Wow. That's a burn. That's a sick burn right there, right out the gate. But it does kind of lead us to the information that ahead of the televised interview, we are actually letting, it seems like Congress and the House know what Jed's about to do.
Yeah. I like that we're giving them a heads up. That feels like this is a gentleman's sport, you know?
Yeah. I know I did write down, I was like, I wonder if this happened with Biden dropping out of the race. But then after I wrote that, I was like, it's kind of not the same though, because that's running for election. That's not like hiding an illness.
I mean, much of the discussion at the time was like, is Biden hiding how much his health is declining? So it was actually a very similar, again, just Aaron Sorkin predicting the future. And that's also kind of the other reason why we're not doing a study session for this week, is because so the obvious thing to discuss would be Biden dropping out of the race and how that was handled. And I just don't know that any of us need to linger on that in this present moment as we record in February 2025.
Yeah.
I just don't know that we're like ready to reflect on that.
No, I agree.
Quite yet.
The scene with Leo and the way it concludes is that they're like, what's he going to do? What's his play? Is he going to run? Is he not going to run? And Leo just like leans back in his chair and goes, Harry, Bill, there's going to be a press conference tonight. I'd watch.
So good.
Unbelievable. And then smash into opening credits. Gorgeous, seamless, unbelievable, very satisfying.
Also, like, literally hate Harry and Bill, though, and I hope we never meet them again.
Yeah, no, they're the worst of it. But
with
actually,
like love and peace to the actors, but it's just it's a no from me for the characters.
Actors doing a really, really great job. Really well written. I think we do meet some more of them in this episode, but it's one of the things I really enjoy about this show is how we don't depict all Democrats as holier than thou perfect politicians.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, for sure. Because there's some asshole Democrats, you better believe.
Yeah, and also just like when you're working in politics, we kind of lose the ability to be idealistic and to be like radical and like, I'm going to change the world. Suddenly you're like bogged down in like funding and paperwork and red tape. And I think it's something that this show is so good at is depicting how that has kind of muddied people's approaches to politics.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I both come from like long-term Labour voting families. Like we would both probably, our inclination would be to vote Labour. But that doesn't mean that when we were serving Keir Starmer in a pub, we weren't like, wow, didn't enjoy you.
A lager? Really? Have a real drink. Have a real drink. Don't drink a lager.
Maybe speak to service staff like they're human beings. Love you. Bye.
But we'll say that his security detail were delightful and really, really tall and big. And you knew when two massive 6'5" blokes came in and ordered a pint of lemonade and a pint of Diet Coke that it wouldn't be long till Sakir came around the corner. Anyway, we digress because we are prepping for the interview, Leigh.
Yeah, love that Toby is so concerned with the lighting. He's immediately coming in with his best stage manager energy. Extremely smart to care so much about the lighting in this context where we need Jed to look at his fittest, at his healthiest. God, yeah. Toby is good. Because I feel like other people wouldn't consider how important something like the lighting would be.
Yeah, which made me kind of like question, because he's like, to know about the lighting. I was like, where's that skill set coming from? Do we feel like there's like a history in TV with Toby? Was he like always in politics?
That would make sense because then he's offered the job later in the episode going into TV. I do wonder about that. And I suppose all we know about his career pre-Jed is that he never successfully got somebody elected. So he must have had other roles in between campaign seasons.
Yeah. And then would it link to how he knows CJ?
That is so true.
With some sort of broadcasting thing. He just generally gives like a harassed TV producer energy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I wrote down, he's giving the like, you know, the morning show character. Is it Chip?
Oh my God, yeah.
He's like giving that energy of just like, I'm so, like, must you all? I'd like to let the record show that I'm here for Sam Seaborn coming in with a welfare check on Jed. I appreciate him being like, is the president up for this today? It is Mrs Landingham's funeral.
Yeah, just a classic confluence of crises.
I don't think he's up for it.
No, none of us make our best decisions when grieving, as we have previously discussed. I will also say I almost didn't recognize Ginger with her gorgeous tousled wave. For a moment I was like, is this a new EA alert? But her hair is looking stunning. It just makes her bone structure somehow look really different.
I think it's when you see people who have, because that's a natural wave that's in her hair. And so I think you're suddenly like, oh, like that's what your hair texture is supposed to be. Gorge. Also, I did have to mention, so Ginger kind of stops Toby in the hall and she's like, you've got this meeting. And he's like, today I don't need meetings. And she's like, no, Leo said you can't cancel it. You need to take this meeting at 4:00. And he like starts losing his rag with Ginger. And then he stops himself. And he just like, as he goes to leave, he like puts his hand over her hand and like gives it a squeeze and then walks away.
He's so sensitive with Ginger really specifically, but
really touched by that.
Never in a way that crosses a line.
No.
There's never an energy about it that like feels at all inappropriate.
No.
With the sensitivity. He cares about her welfare.
It's respectful. It's respectful to CJ and what I can imagine has been an insane few days for her and her team.
I absolutely am obsessed with CJ entering the episode by saying, okay, seeing as this is going to be kind of a light day, I'm thinking I'm going to blow off work, maybe some shopping or something.
Yeah. Like, I think what's important is that she continues to crack zingers throughout.
No matter how exhausted she may be.
Yeah. Josh has come to her with his big tobacco thing.
Josh, this is not a battle for like this day. I also am extremely concerned whenever Josh writes something that he considers to be strongly worded.
Yeah.
Just like so not a moment for picking fights with Democrats. Are you crazy?
Not at all. I really could have done with Josh just taking a day off from the big tobacco thing.
Yeah.
CJ literally says, this is a bad time to be losing Democrats. And she's speaking the truth. Like, he then does like a dramatic reading of what he's written. And then like they have a little moment in the corridor, which is actually like really gorgeous, where he looks at her and he's like, let Bartlet be Bartlet.
The throwback to Let Bartlet be Bartlet was really devastating. And also the fact that CJ, in almost a kind of motherly way, had to turn back to Josh and be like, unfortunately, we can't do that today.
Yeah. You got to put it away for a while.
Devastating.
And then they have this little goodbye as well, like similar to the Ginger Toby thing, where they're like, oh, how do you think he's doing? Have you seen him today? And I just feel like everyone is carrying the weight of their grief so clearly in this episode.
Yes, and CJ has clearly been on a journey that we have not seen And I'm so intrigued to see what it is, because it felt like the last time we saw her and Josh interact one-on-one, it felt like she was placing some distance between them, as if she was kind of getting ready to go.
Yeah.
And she's done some work in the time that we've not seen her, where she's decided that she's all in with these boys.
Yeah. And that she's not going to let herself be thrown to the wolves.
Yes.
Oh, 100%. That's so nuanced. I think the other thing that feels very present in this episode is like this clear worry for Jed, and also just like everyone being aware of the weight of his grief too.
Yes, it's so devastating how much, and it feels so hollow when other people come in and say like, oh, I was sorry to hear about the president's secretary. And you're kind of like, no, the people who get it. She was so much more. She wasn't a secretary. She was Mrs. Landingham. She was like a mother figure. Like, Mrs. Landingham is mother.
She is. Shall we go, Leigh, to a meeting with Sam and some more horrible men?
Oh my God, please. The Democratic strategists. I couldn't with the Democratic strategists.
Like, truly awful. Like, do you know what it is, Leigh? It's a lot of leaning back energy.
Yeah.
A lot of like leaning back in your chair and just like lounging about in the White House.
I find it so repulsive. And you know what? The thing is, as we all know, women in the workplace need to lean in. And therefore, I find it personally offensive when these men are just like in the midst of a huge crisis, when it should be as equally their problem as it is Sam's problem. But they have just decided that they like have jumped ship, basically, before anything has even happened. And it's so annoying. However, Sam Seaborn is firing on all cylinders, and I love it. The absolute zinger, the all-time zinger from Sam Seaborn for me, of don't talk like that here. I don't care whose nephew you are. Oh, it's so good.
It's so hot when he's like that.
I love it when he's like that.
And then him being like, he's not a candidate, he's the president. The scene is so male.
The scene is so male. I would love for there to have been one female Democratic strategist, but that's a story for another day.
I think it's purposeful, and I appreciate how purposeful it is. It's just, I think the thing I really clocked is I was like, oh, these are a group of men who have all the bravado of Joshua Lyman, but with none of the gumption for it to follow through.
Yeah, because they've never had to stick out their neck on a line for one particular candidate. They just
like sit there and comment on everything.
They're just like human embodiments of a pinwheel.
Little boys. I think we should go back to the sit room and to Nancy.
Oh my God, it's all happening. Haiti as well. I don't feel good about a grieving Bartlet in the Situation Room. I don't feel good about anyone grieving in the Situation Room, to be honest with you.
No, I mean, it is incredibly clear that Leo's doing the brunt of the work here. And I was literally about to type, Jed just isn't really like here. And then Leigh, we seamlessly went into flashback.
I was beside myself the minute one of those young men was like, Jed.
What a gift.
What a gift.
What a gift. A gift this flashback was. Did I know that I needed it? No. As soon as the first frame happened, I was like, well, I guess I'm just never going to stop thinking about young Jed.
Yeah.
Wow. Jed's dad is scary.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we kind of knew from the sort of casual references to child abuse that Jed has sort of thrown around this season.
Yeah.
But like, so we flash back to young Jed at school. Looks like a kind of fancy private school. Goes over, looks like one of his dad is one of the teachers. And his dad's like, Jed, look what I found in the chapel. And holds up this cigarette butt and is like, you need to go and talk to your friends about it. And I was like, wow, who's smoking in the chapel? Rock and roll.
Obsessed. But also, the dad is played by a younger Lawrence O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Of MSNBC fame.
Yeah.
The slot after Rachel Maddow. Screaming. Yeah. Love that.
Just a little acting turn from him.
I also love the energy of, I'm a writer on this show and no one will be able to embody this role correctly. Therefore, I must take a turn.
It's Very iconic to be like, we're actively casting for this, but no one's quite as good as me when I've been doing it in the writing room.
No shade on Lawrence O'Donnell. Literally love
No.
you. He's like besties with Rachel Maddow. Love him.
Also, his performance is amazing as this. Like,
you wouldn't change a thing.
No, I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's gorgeous. But guess who he's introducing?
I can't.
A young Dolores Landingham. And he's like, oh, this is Mrs. Landingham. She's going to come and work for me.
The reveal, Fi. The reveal.
That she worked for Jed's dad first.
Oh.
Who knew? Like, I knew we went way back, but I didn't know we went back that far.
I'm so proud of us for clocking this because I feel like it was so evident to us that she had been there. But the extent to which she had been there, I could not believe. I will also say I wanted to give a shout out to this actress because I feel like she did a gorgeous job of like embodying
Amazing.
Mrs. Landingham's voice, but without making it like an impression.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like mimicking.
Yeah.
It was a really good performance. And I couldn't stop watching her. Like, it was like someone had taken a time machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, both of them, to her and to the actor playing young Jed.
He was very well cast as well, for sure.
Incredible. But we have to, we come back to the present day. We're still in the sit room. Jed's just tapping a cigarette on the table. And look, Jed, I think on today, of all days, just have the cig.
Just have the cig.
Today's not the day to quit.
No.
Not when you're burying like one of your closest and oldest friends. I can't quite believe, Leigh, that we're on the brink of invading Haiti.
We're just sending Fitzy.
We're sending Fitzy. But there's basically what they've been talking about with Nancy that kind of Jed's been zoning out of, but Leo's been very much kind of taken by the horns, is that can we send troops on the ground as a peacekeeping force and have it not be declared like war, basically, which feels high stakes.
Extremely high stakes. I'm curious as to whether we're coming back to this in season 3. Yeah, huge.
Also, just so you know, there's a tropical storm heading its way to DC. So.
It's all happening. It's all happening. Yeah. But lovely, lovely reveal that the two cathedrals are in fact going to be the Nash Cathedral and Jed's School Cathedral.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I was really floored by Jed in the Oval Office just being, he's very sad and quiet. Like, Martin Sheen's performance is unbelievable in this episode throughout. And there'll be so many times when I say he's just the most amazing actor. But just this, like, quietness. He's such a bombastic character, Jed Bartlet. But in this episode, he seems so small.
Yeah.
And he just says to Charlie, I'll need pallbearers. And Charlie's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And obviously, like, of course you need pallbearers because Mrs. Landingham doesn't have any living relatives. Yeah. Because her husband and her sons are both dead. Leigh put in our shared doc at this point, I'm still reeling from the flashback. And I mean, so am I.
At this point, I was also like, I need to ensure that we're returning to the flashback because I have so many more questions. And it would be so Aaron Sorkin to just give us a flash of it and then never explain any further.
Yeah, absolutely. And just be like, oh, she was there. And that's it. That's all you get. But we're into a press briefing.
Jane Lynch is back in the press room.
We love to see it. And I'm really glad. And I do really want her to, like, she's kind of only, I think there's once or twice before now. But like, she's so well cast as a
White House reporter.
Yeah, 100%. But I would also just like to mention, it's been a hot old minute since we've seen Danny Concannon.
Oh my God, yeah.
I wonder if he's gone to Mandyland.
We did get a comment from one of our listeners being like, I feel like Leigh and Fi are extremely paranoid about people going to Mandyland now. Like, whenever we don't see anyone for like 2 eps, we're like,
they're gone. He's taken them away. They've been retired. But there was this thing about him getting offered that job, right?
Yeah, but then he didn't take it. That was the whole point.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever see him again.
We shall see. We shall see. We shall see. Although I have to say, dare I say, when it didn't happen and it was clear it wasn't going to happen, I did kind of start to get a bit bored of that plot line. Dare I say.
Leigh, I have to agree entirely.
I didn't love when there was like no frisky and fun flirtation anymore,
Yeah.
I didn't love Danny becoming like the moral arbiter of CJ.
Yeah. Yeah, like holding her to this standard that like was impossible to upkeep.
Yeah.
So after Jed does the interview on TV, they were going to do a press briefing in the East Room. But we can't do that in the East Room anymore because they found asbestos. Asbestos in the White House is kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm sure this must have been a real detail.
Yeah, there's got to be something fun that like someone was like, oh, and then there was this day that like actually we found out we couldn't do this because there was asbestos.
Yeah, for sure.
And Aaron Sorkin was like, that's amazing, put that in the show.
Yeah. I will also say CJ is in a flawless skirt suit through this episode, and also just like seamlessly leaking a story to the press.
Yes. So I wanted to mention this as well. This season, her styling has been so much better. And I think my hot take, Leigh, is that in season 1, we were trying to give CJ outfits. And now in season 2, what we've done is give her a wardrobe.
Oh my God, Fee, you're so smart.
Thank you.
You're so smart, literally. Couldn't agree more. Yes. Also, I feel like potentially in season 1, we were similar to Andrea, Toby's ex. I wonder if we were trying to like age Alice and Janney up a little bit.
I think so, yeah.
To separate her from the women who play the EAs. Whereas I feel like in season 2, we've just like allowed her to be a hot woman.
Yeah. And it just feels like the wardrobe is so much more believable because in season 1 we had this crazy mob wife blowout. And then she would be wearing like a lot of like kind of like silk like dresses or like quite structured skirt suits in like lots of different colors. And the reality is what we've given her in this season is a lot of like grey, black and brown pantsuit and skirt suits and different colored blouses, which is just so much more believable for her job because you can see
would just go to Ann Taylor and get some things she can mix and match.
Exactly. And that she would have like in the office, Carol's got hung up a dry cleaned suit and blouse, like if she needs to like pull a late one or like be dressed in something different, like it just seems so much more believable. But the leaking of the story, so CJ's like says to Carol, can you pull the people from these particular publications? We need to talk about seating on Air Force One.
And I love that is so clearly like something that's actually inconsequential, but the reporters themselves would care about so much that nobody's going to miss that meeting because having their seat on Air Force One is so important to being part of the press pool.
Yeah. So all of the journalists are like CJ, like, do we really need to like have a meeting about this today? Like, do we really need to be talking about this? And she just like turns, looks at them, and it's filmed like from the end of the corridor. So you just see the full length of the corridor and then her in her office and her going to close the door. And she just says, notebooks, no tape recorders. The story's embargoed for an hour and you'll identify me as a senior White House official. And then just closes the door.
I've never fancied someone more.
Honestly, everyone is being such a hot bitch in this
obviously
episode.
For my girlfriend, Lizzie, if you're listening, obviously.
Obviously my real life girlfriend. Some conjecture that's importantly, the door in the Oval Office is broken. It's the door that goes out into the portico and it keeps swinging open because there's like a wind tunnel that gets created through the West Wing. And to me, I just think that that's an insane security threat.
Such an insane security threat. I love that it's kind of treated as like this like, ooh, like already even at this point in the episode, it's being treated as like, ooh, there's some like hijinks at play. Ghosts are coming. And yet it's like, no, an active shooter could get through that door. Like, please.
Yeah, I mean, what I must say at this point, and of course we will come back to this at the kind of climax of the episode, is Aaron Sorkin has no right to bring ghosts into a drama this serious.
No, for sure.
To have it work.
For sure.
No right. But Jed goes to ask Charlie about the door and when it's being fixed. And it was just this really amazing choice that when we go into the office where Charlie's desk is, that conversation between Charlie and Jed is filmed from Mrs Landingham's desk. So you're looking out over her empty desk.
Oh my God, I did not clock that at all. Again, you're so smart.
It just was heartbreaking because it's like all of her personal belongings had been taken away.
Oh.
So like the little cookie thing's not there anymore. Margaret looks hot though.
Margaret does look hot. Also, fun conjecture potentially for our town hall later. Obviously, the president is going to need a new secretary.
Yeah, you read my mind.
Fun to note for season 3. But should we go back into A Journey to the Past?
A Journey to the Past. Yes, another flashback moment for Jed as he flicks on his suit jacket.
It becomes his school blazer. A seamless flashback. Lovely transition.
Honestly, it's up there with the best. I clapped. I mean, I was drunk, but I clapped.
I also love how I thought the issue of, because the word that Jed kind of catches on that triggers the memory is the notion that Dolores is having a non-denominational funeral service. And I thought the issue was going to be that Jed was like, no, it absolutely must be a Catholic service.
Me too. So I was like, wait, he's about to argue with Margaret about the funeral of Mrs Landingham. But actually, it was just the claw that pulled us back into the flashback.
And I have to say, of course, Jed is the headmaster's son. Nothing has ever made more sense.
It reads so perfectly for me. It's just a perfect chip on the shoulder for Jed Bartlet. You know, I was the headmaster's son, so I only got to go to that really amazing school because my dad worked there. And like this idea of like what people deserve from hard work. There's a scene with young Jed and young Mrs Landingham where she's like, why do you work? Like, why do you stay after class? And he's like, oh, I work here after classes because I get free tuition and I feel like I should give something back.
And you can see Mrs Landingham kind of note that and go, that's a very specific perspective for like a teenage boy to have.
Yeah.
And you can see her like respect that.
Yeah. And then he calls her Dolores and she just stops him and is like, Mrs Landingham.
I love it. So we're getting the thread of Mrs Landingham's sense of decorum even then.
Yeah. And you think, to my knowledge, and please, Wingnuts, help us with this if you know more than us, which is likely. I don't think Jed ever calls Mrs Landingham Dolores.
No.
Ever. Unbelievable. To the motorcade, Leigh.
To the motorcade. And I immediately... I simply must discuss Abby Bartlet's hat.
It's the funniest thing.
Beside myself. Every shot, I put it on our Instagram story, but every shot of this funeral where Abby is just serving cunt in the background in this funeral attire, I can't.
There is always one person at a funeral who looks too fucking hot to be there. And it is Abby Bartlet on this day. She is wearing a hat that is insane.
It's giving Michael Jackson, and I don't know why.
There's a touch of Michael Jackson about it. There's a touch of like the top hat with netting from the Shania Twain video.
Oh my God, yes, I do see that also. It's a Shania Michael
hybrid. It's also giving Pilgrim. It's kind of giving Quaker. Like the Quaker Oats man.
And hey, look, I love
it's giving Guy Fawkes, Leigh. She's dressed like Guy Fawkes.
For our American listeners, Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament back in the 1600s. Is that right?
Yeah, let's say that. Let's say that.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's that hat though. It's like the tall, wide hat. It's giving kind of Crucible chic.
I mean, I love a strong look to a funeral. Do you know what I mean?
I saw Goody Landingham with the devil.
I love that Dolores is receiving like a full state funeral.
I wanted to talk about this. So can we just take a moment for the cathedral?
The cathedral is so crazy.
It's a crazy building. Like in no way understated at all. Like also like go Mrs Landingham. Massive deal to have a funeral there, like
huge deal, and only what she deserves.
That's like having her funeral in Westminster Abbey.
Oh, fully, yeah. She is getting the full Maggie Thatch treatment. Do you know what I mean?
The thing for me is, because I forget that like nothing's really that old in America. As in like what is considered modern day United States.
Yeah.
And so you're like, whoa, this insane huge building. They started building it in 1907.
Yeah.
But it's like it's trying to play that it's like fucking Notre Dame. Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is the cathedral in France. Notre Dame is the American Catholic University.
Yeah, wow. My brain that was the two margaritas really kicking in there. It's trying to pass itself off as like Notre Dame.
Yeah.
In Paris. And I'm like, but you're not though. You're quite a modern church.
It's giving new money. It's giving the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Just shout out to Molly Brown. Shout out Molly Brown. We love you, girl.
Her. The only person to treat Jack Dawson with an ounce of respect.
Yeah. What's the name of the actress who? Kathy Bates?
Kathy Bates.
Hun.
Love
her. Unbelievable performance in Titanic. Stunning.
Love her.
So Margaret is also wearing a hat.
Margaret is also in a hat. It's a lovely velvet number.
It's quite 1920s. It's like a little like tight little velvet.
Yeah. She looks like something out of an Alanis Morissette video, which is only what she deserves because sometimes her costuming really does age her up. But here I'm like, I believe you're besties with Alanis.
Yeah. And I believe that you're the same generation as Ginger, Bonnie and Donna.
Mm-hmm.
The panning shots of everyone at the funeral was incredibly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like as we're all coming into the cathedral, we're all taking our seats. The camera's like panning along each row. Like I know that we've come to work today as actors to perform grieving at a funeral. But there's something very real for me. And I just feel like it probably was quite a hard day filming.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of those actors like really honoring an actor who they got to work with, who they really respected, who's of another generation, who's leaving this project. And I can imagine there was a real grief there to not be working with her anymore. Yeah,
because she's such a like fundamental name in like TV and film. To get to like work with Catherine, you're like, would have been like, I imagine like one of the honors of their careers.
Yeah.
Just Carol being like so clearly moved ended me. Oh, I guess that's time probably to head into another flashback.
Let's head back into the past.
I wrote in our document at this point, and it was, with some research, confirmed. The school that all the flashbacks are happening at, that young Jed is at, is the school from Dead Poets Society.
And that does read for me. I believe that he went to the school from Dead Poets Society.
Yeah. Like I'm just waiting for Robin Williams to come round the corner. Honestly, I watched Dead Poets Society for the first time reasonably recently, like within the last couple of years.
Together, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
Because we had to pause it because we were crying. Which is very on brand for us.
Of mine and Fi's
it's an
movie viewing.
Unbelievable film.
It's a masterpiece.
But talk about, like difficult relationships between sons and fathers.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
Yeah. So they're going from Dead Poets Society to, Jed and his father. I did also note that this kind of from this point onwards, I started sobbing.
Yeah, was also not prepared for Charlie doing a reading at Mrs. Landingham's funeral.
I was not prepared for Charlie to do a reading. And then Leigh, you wrote something in the shared doc which blew my mind.
Because this was the moment, upon having now seen a couple of interactions between young Jed and young Mrs. Landingham, I was like, oh my God, Mrs. Landingham was recreating her relationship with young Jed with Charlie because it had the same bouncy energy that Mrs. Landingham and Charlie had, which also is so emotional because it makes me think she sees the same thing in Charlie that she saw in a young Jed. She like believes in him to that extent.
Okay. They're not real people. I've got to stop crying because they're not real people. They're made up. Yeah, it was that. It's like her being like, I see something in you that maybe you don't see in yourself. Or you don't have the people around you to champion you. So I'm going to champion you. Oh my God. not prepared for Charlie to do a reading.
Yeah.
And actually, what I will say is thank you, Aaron Sorkin, for not showing that. Because frankly, I would have been.
Also, like, just with the knowledge that, like, Charlie would have been at his mother's funeral, like, less than 2 years ago. And now he's at, like, his surrogate mother's funeral. His work mom's funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to go into young Jed and young Mrs. Landingham again because I can't linger on Charlie. The dynamic between the two of them is so great. And actually, it is a really accurate, like, transposing of the relationship that we see Jed have with Mrs. Landingham anyway. It's like this, like, kind of witty, pithy back and forth where, like, you know, he's a little grumpy. He's always a little grumpy. And she's, like, needling him.
Yeah.
Because basically what young Dolores Landingham is doing is she's like, I want to talk to you, Jed, about the pay disparity between female members of staff and male members of staff at this school. And he's like, I don't want to talk about it. He goes, numbers, Mrs. Landingham. If you want to convince me of something, show me numbers. Which I'm just obsessed with because I'm like, the boy never changed. The boy loves numbers. Jed just loves numbers. I wish I could be there the day that, like, Jed got his Nobel Prize for economics because Mrs. Landingham would have been there.
Was not prepared.
She would have been so proud.
I was not prepared for that.
I know.
And, like, she would have thought that's the peak. That's the peak of what this young boy is going to achieve. And then he becomes the president of the United
States of America? Unbelievable.
Oh my God. At my gig last night, somebody asked if there was anybody from, like, abroad in the audience. And this girl raised her hand and they were like, where are you from? And she was like, the United States of America.
To and full I was like, name it.
How do I already know you voted for Trump?
To full name it yourself in a kind of like anybody from here scenario fundamentally is insane. So we're in our flashback and Jed's car is broken down. Yeah. Which is fun because it does confirm to us that, like, Jed doesn't know anything about cars. Yeah. As we suspected. Mrs. Landingham's, like, leaning in through the window. She's like, so what's up with the car? And he's like, I think it's the carburetor or the fan belt or something. And she's like, oh, why do you say that? And he's like, because those are 2 words I know about cars. And then she says, you fix your car and pretend you're not listening. I'm going to stand here and talk to you because I know you are. Oh. To which he responds, there's something abnormal about you. But it's just, that's always been their way. Like, if Martin Sheen said that in a scene, I'd be like, yeah, no, that's absolutely how Jed would speak. Yeah. It's so well written. We then cut back briefly to the funeral. Yeah. To everyone exiting and the pallbearers stepping up. Yeah.
Was not prepared for Toby as pallbearer.
Was not prepared for, like, Toby. I
was not prepared for that on any level.
I got goosebumps.
Yeah, same.
I was not prepared for Toby, Sam, Josh, Charlie to step up and, like, carry her out. Yeah. It was a lot.
There's also something so beautiful about, like, Josh and Toby as, like, 2 Jewish men stood there and being like, I'm fully honoring this faith and I'm fully, like, present here in this moment because I loved this woman.
Yeah. And we, as they're carrying out the coffin, we kind of pan across the cathedral and there's one gorgeous shot which is Donna, Margaret and Carol all sat together.
Which I feel we've never seen all 3 of them in one frame before.
Yeah. And they're just, like, all of them are crying and, like, the cinematic tears. It's gorgeous. And then the same thing, like, we cut to CJ and, like, Alison Janney just, like, bows her head forward as the coffin passes and, like, tears, like, you can see them tears, like, falling from her face. Gorgeous. But bam, we're back into flashback.
And one of the greatest exchanges of televisual history.
Because Jed asked for the numbers. So Mrs. Landingham brought him the numbers and she runs through, like, the, like, pay of each of these individual members of staff. And, like, how, you know, some members of staff are getting paid more for doing extracurricular work than the women are. And someone in the cafeteria gets paid this much less than the groundskeeper. Leigh, would you like to be baby Jed or baby Mrs. Landingham?
I would love to see your baby Jed today, please.
Okay. Well, what do you want me to do about it?
I want you to bring it up to your father.
See, I'm not a woman and I don't work here.
The women who do work here are afraid for their jobs. If they bring it up, they're afraid of their jobs. What are you afraid of?
Why do you talk to me like this?
Because you never had a big sister and you need one. Look at you. You're a boy king. You're a foot smarter than the smartest kids in the class. You're blessed with inspiration. You must know this by now. You must have sensed it. Look, if you think we're wrong, if you think Mr. Hopkins should honestly be paid more than Mrs. Chadwick, then I respect that. But if you think we're right and you don't speak up because you can't be bothered, then God, Jed, I don't even want to know you. Come inside. I'll call AAA. Fi's crying. Like full Kim K lost her diamonds in the ocean crying.
I never saw the big sister thing.
No.
Until this scene. And then I was like, fuck. That's what it was.
Yeah.
You don't have
her Joni.
Oh my God. The popcorn machine. This TV show is fucked, man. This TV show is fucked. She then pushes him, like she needles him again. And as she's walking away to go and call AAA, and this was a marker for me. I was like, huh. And then it comes full circle at the end. Incredible. She says, you're going to do it. And he says, I didn't say that. She says, yes, you did. When? Just then. You stuck your hands in your pockets, you looked away and smiled. That means you've made up your mind.
No.
And it was at this point, Leigh, that I did send that incomprehensible voice note to you.
Oh, interesting. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
It was after the big sister thing.
Right, yeah.
It's predominantly me sobbing and just saying it's not fair.
Yes, and dear patrons, if you've not enjoyed that voice note yet, I can confirm that it will be on our Patreon for you to enjoy. Also, dear listener, if you'd be interested in joining our Patreon for the purposes of listening to that voice note, it's really quite something. So please do check it out.
Back to the funeral and yet another outrageous Abby Bartlet moment.
So basically, there's this really emotional moment happening between Jed and Leo at the end of the funeral. And Abby is just posed. She doesn't come into the scene. She's just posed in the background like Black Widow at the back of the National Cathedral, just in full heels.
Like heels, hat, and a black mini dress with fucking I don't think they were fishnets, but in my head she was wearing fishnets. And she's cocked her hip and one of her legs is out and she's silhouetted.
I fully believed
acceptable.
She was about to go and fight crime. Do you know what I mean?
I thought she was going to fucking walk down the aisle of that cathedral like it was a catwalk.
I thought she was going to go full Kill Bill. It was just so much.
Yes. I just feel like Stockard got brought in for her guest starring credit and was like, look, the script's pretty light on lines for me. So gonna need to be present in quite a lot of the action if poss.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna need to look fucking hot as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? There is a very Elizabeth Taylor energy about Abby Bartlet.
For sure. Leo then out Leos himself.
Honestly, you're gonna have to perform this line. It's incomprehensible to me.
She was a real dame, old friend. A real broad.
Did I cry when he said it? Yes,
line.
Obviously I cried when he said that. What an epitaph. What an epitaph to receive. She was a real dame, a real broad. Put that on my headstone.
Literally, I want someone to say that about me when I die.
Yeah, carve it into marble, let it stay there forever. And then, Leigh, we're going to get to the monologue, right?
Oh, absolutely. Jed fully being taken to church, Hosier style here. He's having a literal come to Jesus moment.
He kind of asks to have the room, which obviously makes sense, but the room is just an entire cathedral. Cue Martin Sheen performing the monologue of a lifetime.
Performing a play, just a one-man show.
In the National Cathedral.
We simply must discuss Jed's prayer in depth.
Yeah. Could you perform, please?
Absolutely. You're a son of a bitch, you know that. Speaking to God. I can't stress this enough. Speaking to God. You're a son of a bitch, you know that. She bought her first new car and you hit her with a drunk driver. What? Is that supposed to be funny? You can't conceive, nor can I, of the appalling strangeness of the mercy of God, says Graham Greene. I don't know whose ass he was kissing there, 'cause I think you're just vindictive. What was Josh Lyman? A warning shot? That was my son. This was the point where I started to ugly cry, because he only has he thinks of Josh as a son.
Just a son.
What did I ever do to yours but praise his glory and praise his name? There's a tropical storm that's gaining speed and power. They said we haven't had a storm that bad since you took that tender ship of mine in the North Atlantic last year. 68 crew. A moment for, what was the young man's name?
I want to say Harvey, but that's wrong. But the young man on the
young man.
They're talking on the phone.
Stayed on the line.
Jed's like, I'm going to stay on the line.
Devastating. You know what a tinder ship does? Fixes the other ships. Doesn't even carry guns. Just goes around fixing the other ships and delivers the mail. That's all it can do. Gracias tibiano domine. Yes, I lied. It was a sin. I've committed many sins. Have I displeased you, you feckless thug? Love bringing in your favorite word, Fee, feckless. Referring to God.
To God as a thug. As a thug.
38 million new jobs. That wasn't good. Bailed out Mexico, increased foreign trade, 30 million new acres of land for conservation, put Mendoza on the bench. We're not fighting a war. I've raised 3 children. Was that not enough to buy me out of the doghouse? And then we go into a lot of Latin.
Shit ton of Latin. Unfucking believable. Lee,
Iconic.
would you like to know what he's saying in Latin?
Please tell me. Please immediately tell me.
Unbelievable. Okay, so this is a translation of the Latin rant. Thank you, internet, for providing me with this. I'd just like to say, I'm not a Latin translator.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is wrong, I'm sorry. I give thanks to you, O Lord. Am I really to believe that these are the acts of a holy God, a just God, a wise God? To hell with your punishments. I was your servant here on earth, your messenger. I did your work. To hell with your punishments. To hell with you.
Iconic. And then he stamps out his cigarette.
He lights
on
up a
the
cig
altar.
and then throws it down on the floor and stamps it out. And suddenly I'm like, it was him.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one who smoked in the chapel. And Lee, Jed cussing out God in Latin is the most fucking badass rock and roll thing I've ever perceived with my eyes.
I can't with men losing their faith. In the words of R.E.M., losing their religion.
There is such a fundamentally, unbelievably exciting character turning point.
Yes.
For someone who has been so clear that they're like, he was gonna be a priest.
Yeah. And
to be like, not only are we finding him in this moment of crisis in terms of the fact that he's lied about his health, but we are going to shake his faith. The one thing, his anchor point, the thing that almost in a way defines him as a human being.
His guiding light, his moral compass.
We're going to take that away. And that's what he's saying is, give me a reason to believe in you. Because right now, I don't know what you want. And as he walks out, he's stamps out his cigarette. He walks out and he just shouts back, you get hoins.
Oh my God.
Which I think is him being like, I'm fucking done. I'm going to stop trying. You know what? You get hoins. That's what if that's what you want, you get him.
Yeah. It was so powerful. Also,
that was my son.
That was my son.
That was my son.
Oh.
That was my son.
There was just so much in that monologue. So much.
What did I ever do to yours but praise his glory and praise his name?
Whoa.
Fuck me. Jesus Christ. Lads in the rights room, you turned up to
Literally
play.
never knew you felt that way about Josh until this moment.
That was my son. What did I ever do to yours but praise his glory and praise his name? Bailed out Mexico, increased foreign trade, 30 million new acres of land for conservation, put Mendoza on the bench. We're not fighting a war. I've raised 3 children. Do you know what? Maybe instead of at karaoke singing songs, I'm just going to perform this monologue.
Whoa. I want to see drag queens lip sync battle this monologue.
Yes, so maybe we workshop that, Lee. Maybe that's something for me to take forward as a new artistic project.
Martin Sheen's performance in this monologue was so real to me, of like the people that I know in my life who've lost their faith due to kind of tragedy.
Yeah.
And it's even more devastating when it's a person who is kind of 50 plus and has held on to their faith for their entire life. And at this point in life, they're losing their faith.
Yeah. For me, something that this show is so good at, and the writing and the acting always toes this line really well, is that when we have moments of like explosive anger or rage, they are incredibly earned.
Yes.
And there is not a single choice that Martin Sheen makes in that performance that isn't earned. Because me dramatic reading it, obviously it's like I'm taking it to the nth degree. Every single one of those statements to Jed Bartlet is true.
But he also delivers it like a campaign speech. He doesn't deliver it. He's not like a sobbing mess. Do you know what I mean? It's he's trying to have like a debate with God.
It's because he's the true president of the United States of America.
He is the true chosen one.
Yeah. We have to get back to the White House.
Yeah.
So we're in with the gang and we're prepping. Jed's going to do his TV interview, and then there's going to be the following press briefing. And obviously at that press briefing, the question will be asked, which is, are you going to run for re-election? So that's what we're prepping. And we've termed the two possible answers, answer A and answer B. Answer A is obviously, yes, of course, I would never not run again. I'm so excited. What a dream. And answer B, as proposed by Josh, is...
Are you out of your mind? I can't win re-election. I lied about a degenerative illness. I'm the target of a grand jury investigation, and Congress is about to take me out to lunch. I'd sooner have my family take their clothes off and dance the tarantella on the Truman balcony than go through the campaign with this around my neck.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you so much for that really helpful contribution there. I will say the exhaustion in this room, it's like CJ, Sam, and Josh.
And Toby.
And Toby is so real. Like you can just feel how exhausted they all are. We're like hitting a wall in the biggest way. And everyone is kind of leaning into their most stereotypical versions of themselves.
This was completely on the money, Leigh, because CJ's like grappling. She's classically trying to like manage everyone and be like, okay, so what's the plan? Josh is like, I'm going to say pithy things. Toby is silent. And Sam's overly emotional. It's perfect.
CJ is like trying to de-emotionalize it as much as possible, literally like breaking it down, answer A and answer B, and take all of the feeling out of it. And Josh is putting all of the feeling in. Sam is putting all of the feeling in.
There's this back and forth between Sam and CJ that I was completely obsessed with, which was Sam saying, I want to bring it up again.
Why?
Because I got shouted down the first 3 times and I work here just like you do. Can I help you? And I was like, oh, okay.
Sam's imposter syndrome truly coming out to play here.
Because what Sam's concerned with is what he was saying at the start of the episode when he's like, should we do this today? Like, is the president okay? Sam's like, we should postpone. He's just had the funeral for Mrs. Landingham. How are we going to expect him to, 1, do that interview, and 2, then be able to like answer questions from the press?
Yeah.
I feel Sam's point of view so deeply and I agree with him, but I understand why we can't.
We can't backtrack at this point. Like this runaway train is off the rails and there's no bringing it back. And also, this was the moment where I was like, oh my God, we've set this up like a family and Sam is baby. Sam is the baby sibling who doesn't get his voice heard. And then we have like eldest son, Toby, eldest daughter, CJ, angsty middle child, Josh.
Yeah. I mean, I thought you were going to say that Toby's the dad. In my head, Toby's the dad. Toby's dad. And then CJ's like first eldest daughter, overachiever, perfectionist, like angsty middle child, Josh. And then just like sweet emotional baby boy, Sam.
Yeah.
Ginger then pops her head in to pull Toby out for this meeting that he couldn't cancel because Leo wanted him to take it. And he has this amazing phrase to describe like his feeling towards having to take this meeting. For reasons passing understanding, I have to take this meeting.
For reasons passing understanding is a sentiment and an energy that I'm going to take into my future life.
And so this dude comes in and offers Toby a job.
Yeah, Toby getting a private sector job offer. Did not see that coming for this meeting. But also glad to see he's finally being seen for his value after a long career of failures.
And we clocked it because it's to be the news director of a new 24-hour cable news channel.
It's the start of the 24-hour news cycle, baby.
You're just like suddenly firmly in 2001, aren't you?
Yeah. The news no longer ends at 7 p.m.
There is no lid. The lid is always off.
Oh, God.
We do get a Josh Donna moment in this episode, which is very sorely needed. It's quite small, but it's there, which is we're back in Josh's office with Donna, and she's just losing her mind because she's like, I don't understand how just somewhere Bartlet and Leo are in a room deciding whether or not he's going to run for presidency again.
Yeah.
Like, how is it just that them having a conversation?
Love Donna's incredulity with, this is how it works.
Yeah, me and you both, hun. Toby cuts through the bullpen and is trying, like a couple of people try and flag him down. And he's like, don't anybody talk to me right now. And I did enjoy that. He then like storms into Josh's office and says, Josh, Greg Summerhays was here to offer me a job. Leo got me a lifeguard. I'm going to rip his arms off and beat his... And then he gets cut off because Josh is on the phone. And he looks up and he says, Leo says it's answer B.
But it's not really answer B, is it? Because we know we've got like 5 more seasons of this show to watch. So what is it that changes Jed's mind? A.
But imagine if you were watching this when it was airing.
Yeah, you might be like, this is how they wrap up the whole series. This is the end. Also, will it happen in the interview that we're about to do?
What, his changing of his mind? Yeah.
Yes. Or my other thought was, is Hoynes going to take the mantle and fuck it up somehow? And then Jed has to step back in Kamala style at the last minute on the Democratic ticket. Because I just wouldn't have been able to handle that narrative. But that was where my anxious brain went.
But Leigh, we don't get to even have that thought because in classic Aaron style, we're just straight into the aftermath of the interview.
I'm so annoyed. I feel robbed. How am I supposed to judge how it went when I've not seen it?
We had so much build up to this interview and then we saw nothing of it.
Multiple episodes of build up and we didn't get to see it. I'm raging.
Also, another thing in classic Aaron style, a storm is raging over the White House. Like a tropical storm is raging. So we're kind of post-interview. The camera's kind of panning through the halls of the White House and there's loads of everyone's TV screens are on in their office showing the news cycle kind of following this interview. And we're getting ready to like get Jed to the press junket that's happening afterwards. And it's a scene between Toby and Leo. It's so good. Like, such a good scene between the two of them. The conversation is so interesting because basically Toby's like, you sent Summerhays to come and talk to me and you knew he was going to offer me a job. You've given me a lifeline there. Like, what the fuck, man? Like, did you think I was going to leave? Do you think I was going to jump ship? And then Leo, this is amazing political gameplay from Leo, who's like, no, I didn't think you were going to leave. I just wanted you to tell him that you weren't going to leave.
So good.
Like telling a huge TV executive, no, this isn't a sinking ship.
Yeah.
Why would I be
good.
leaving?
It's so good.
Unbelievable.
So cute that Jed wants to see Donna, though.
Yeah, a really nice little scene between Donna and Bartlet, where you do get the feeling that she's like, I kind of can't believe I've been given this task. Like, this is a huge deal. And like, she comes into, I think it's just like a little side room that he's waiting in, and she sits down. And I just feel like he knows that she enjoys her like learning and research tasks.
Yeah.
And like, there's a little bit of the like him being the teacher, like he is with Charlie.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that he's like, I want to talk about the weather. What he wants to talk about is the tropical storm that's rapidly approaching. But I love that she just slips in a little, we all thought you did very well, sir.
Yeah.
Because you know that means the EAs as a collective.
All watch together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she kind of gives him a brief on this tropical storm. And basically the information is that it's entirely unprecedented.
I love the period of time when unprecedented weather events were unprecedented.
Yeah.
Whereas that's like a kind of monthly vibe these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Aaron is just, he loves pathetic fallacy.
He loves
But he's
it.
leaning hard into
It's the most camp it's ever been, for sure.
It's almost too much.
It's almost, there. We'll get to it, but there's a point where it becomes very Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Yes, I think that the lighting crew went a bit, for me, there's a touch too much lightning. Like a touch too much lightning.
Yeah, there's a moment where it comes kind of like, are we in Frankenstein? Like, are we in a gothic novel right now?
Yes. Yeah, are we in a Hammer horror film? It's kind of the vibe.
Yeah.
So we get a last minute bit of prep from CJ to Jed, which is when you get up to the lectern, you need to ask Altman to give the first question because he's going to ask you a medical question and then he'll have a couple of follow-ups and that will kind of give us some grounding before the inevitable next question, which is, are you going to run for re-election?
Yeah.
And Jed's like, yeah, okay, sure. And then the storm takes us back into flashback once more, Leigh.
Yeah.
Into a really dark bit of flashback.
I didn't see it going here. I thought we were going to kind of stay in whimsy.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to stay in like a kind of Hardy Boys-esque world. We do not.
Yeah, I really wasn't expecting baby Jed to be part of like a radical school newspaper that's writing like a scathing article about book banning.
Very prescient for today. Fine.
Yeah. And obviously his dad, the headmaster, is pissed. He's like, you think you can write things like this about the teachers? And Jed's like, well, he's banning books. Also, shout out to one of the books mentioned, Giovanni's Room. Yep. Absolutely freaking banging book.
Also love Jed, even at this young age, being a gay ally. Just being like, they don't like it because it's about homosexuals. But I'm chill.
But I'm chill with the gays, Dad. And then his dad is like, you're a guest at this school.
Horrifying.
How cold is that about your own son? You're a guest at this school. And then he just slaps Jed around the head.
Crazy.
And then Jed brings up this non-denominational thing again.
Yeah.
About the chapel at the school. And plot twist. Jed's dad hates Catholics. Interesting.
Dad hates Catholics. Crazy.
You're Catholic because your mother is, and you're at this school because I'm the headmaster. How's that for clever with words?
It's not giving a loving marriage. I'll say that.
You're Catholic because your mother is, and you're at this school because I'm the headmaster. How's that for clever with words? Oh.
Why do you hate your son? Like, why do you hate him?
Yeah, like, it's brutal, isn't it?
Yeah. And Lawrence O'Donnell just absolutely slaying throughout.
Yeah, Lawrence, an amazing turn from Lawrence in that scene. And then, because this is the moment, the reason why Jed had gone into his dad's office was to talk to him about the thing that Mrs. Landingham had been talking to him about. And so after this whole, like, the school newspaper thing and then the non-denominational services and his dad basically being like, fuck you. He chickens out and he doesn't ask about the female members of staff's wages. And Leigh, I think that still haunts Jed Bartlet to this day.
But also, it's a callback to Mrs. Landingham when Mrs. Landingham was like, these women are scared of losing their jobs if they speak up. What are you scared of?
And then it's, I'm scared of my dad.
Yeah.
And she knew that when she said that to him.
Yeah.
She knew that Jed was scared of his father. She just needed him to like put a name to it.
Yeah. But then when we journey back to the present, this is when Jed is fully Dorothy. In Oz. The Oval Office is being picked up and we are on our way to Munchkinland.
We are within a tornado. We're in a darkened Oval Office. The storm is raging and the broken door to the portico blows open once more with like a torrent of like loads of wind and like rain. And then Jed just goes, damn it, Mrs. Landingham. And I was like, oh no, that was a gut reaction. She's not there. She's dead.
But
this is too much.
She is there, Fi.
And then Jed just has like an episode essentially where he sees Dolores Landingham and they just have a scene together.
In her full glory.
In her full glory.
God doesn't make cars crash and you know it. Stop using me as an excuse.
Yeah, I started crying again here.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I got a secret for you, Mrs. Landingham. Like, I'm not the most popular Democrat in the party.
I've got a secret for you, Mr. President. Your father was a prick who could never get over the fact he wasn't as smart as his brothers. Are you in a tough spot? Yes. Do I feel sorry for you? I do not. Why? Because there are people way worse off than you.
And then the camera pulls back and like actually shows that it's the empty chair that he's looking at and talking to.
Also, go Mrs. Landingham calling someone a prick in the Oval.
In the Oval, using foul language in the Oval.
Screaming.
Good for you, girl. We then have this callback where Mrs. Landingham says, you know, if you don't want to run again, I respect that. But if you don't run because you think it'll be too hard or you think you're going to lose, well, God, Jed, I don't even want to know you.
So with this whole time, we've been thinking that Jed's moral backbone is Catholicism, when in fact, it was Mrs. Landingham all along.
And it's the like roll back to like, she said, that's what she said to me when I was a kid. And I thought it was going to be too hard to stand up for myself. And now I'm like a grown, adult, middle-aged man. And I just need to take the same words of advice from a woman who was smarter than me.
Also, to your point earlier, is this the first time we ever get a Jed from a grown Mrs. Landingham?
Yes, because she always calls him Mr. President or Sir.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And Leigh.
And then something I did not see coming.
Are you ready? Are you ready for dire straits to kick in?
So, both physically and spiritually, Jed is walking into the storm. Cue the dire straits.
I just didn't expect it to go there.
I didn't expect it to go there. And this is the moment where we
brothers in
unlock
arms.
Rock and roll, rock chick, Jed Bartlet.
I'm just a rock chick. I just like to rock out. Just reference to Avril Lavigne there. If you know, you know. Yeah, the Dire Straits musical cue, Brothers in Arms, crazy, obsessed. I love it. He walks out in the portico door into the rain. Charlie runs in, tries to give him a coat. He rejects the coat from Charlie, soaked, walking through the halls of the West Wing. Note, Charlie goes, as they walk back through the office, Charlie puts down Jed's coat. He then takes his own coat off because he's like, if Jed's going coatless, so am I. At this point, I was up. I was out of my seat, Leigh. I was on my feet. Like, we walk to the press conference. It's insane. The strut on everyone through the halls, like Toby.
Everyone
Sam,
looks the fittest
Josh.
they've ever looked.
We're walking to fucking war. It's unbelievable.
We're all still in our funeral blacks to honor Mrs. Landingham.
Jed, I cannot express how he is soaking wet.
CJ, meanwhile, seamlessly fielding questions. Please, I can only answer 14 or 15 questions at once. She's like in a giant hall. Just commanding the space.
It's incredible. We cut to the motorcade. Jed, soaking wet still, staring straight ahead. Leo looking to his right, like, fucking hell, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. We're walking into the press conference. Carol at the doorway. She sees Jed. She looks at CJ and just nods. That nod spoke 1,000 words, Leigh.
Carol is standing. She's honoring everyone in that room. Donna and Margaret rushing in, breathless, because they are not missing this moment in history. They are here to bear witness. They also both look the most beautiful they've ever looked.
Yeah, gorgeous. Jed looks insane. He's like bedraggled. Like, again, I'm going to say he's soaking wet.
But also, Jed looks hot.
He's never looked hotter. Unbelievable. And then you see him look to CJ, you see CJ looking at him, you see CJ looking to the guy in the audience who's like the journalist that Jed's supposed to go to first. We all look at Altman, we then look back to Jed, and Jed doesn't choose that guy. He goes, Sandy. He's gone off script.
He's gone off piece.
And we're straight in with the question, are you going to run for re-election? He then... Leigh absolutely killed me with this note in the shed.
Jed just gives full X Factor judges' houses pause here.
Like, the silence has never been louder. Wild. And then, Leigh, we just cut across to Leo, and Leo's smiling, and he just goes, watch this. And then we cut back to Jed. He puts his hands in his pockets and looks to the side and smiles because he's made up his mind. It's all for Dolores. And that's the end of the episode and the end of the season. What's he going to say? I think it's going to be answer A, Leigh.
It's for sure.
I think it's
going to be
answer A.
answer A. It couldn't be anything else. We don't need to hear the answer. We know what the answer is going to be.
I know what he said. Rock and roll.
We have been speaking for an hour and a half just about this episode. So cutting the study session this week was absolutely the correct decision.
Yeah, no, I feel really good about that. Leigh, I think we should just go through the rapid fires and then just open up some discussion points. How do you feel about that?
I feel really good about that, yeah.
Best fashion.
For me, I'm going to give it to Margaret in her velvet hat, giving full flapper glam.
Yes. I mean, if we're speaking hats, something must be said for Stockard Channing's outfit and hat in this episode.
The thing is, I don't know if I loved or hated that hat. I know that I had a really intense gut reaction to that hat.
Yeah, I felt a lot about it, but I don't know how I felt about it.
Agreed.
I think everyone's funeral looks deserve a mensch.
Yeah, Josh looked incred. My favorite Josh, formal suit look actually ever.
But I think for me, best fashion just has to go to Jed in the Rain.
Yeah.
I would love to just mention, as much as he's awful, Jed's hateful father is wearing a lovely cardigan.
You love a granddad cardigan, though.
I do. But yes, Jed in the Rain, clear winner.
Which brings us seamlessly into what a British or Irish politician could never get away with.
Doing a press conference wet.
Yeah, it's the only time I've ever felt bad for Rishi Sunak. And even then, it was kind of slightly Bishop.
Oh, I mean, I think rephrase that because it sounds like you like Rishi Sunak.
No, I said it's the only time I've ever felt bad for him.
Oh, that's the two margaritas.
It's the only time I've ever felt an ounce of sympathy towards him because he just looked so sad and little.
And he's a wee man. And when he was, I mean, he's only going to be 8 stone dry. So
oh, God.
You can't look powerful as a British politician if you are damp.
No.
Whereas there's something quite sexy about it for an American.
It's the way that Jed's hair, because it's always so perfect, is he's got a flick of a fringe coming down over the forehead.
It's giving him and Abby Bartlet Letterman jacket, never go out style.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
Like James Dean look in his eye.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
Let's return to my thoughts from season 1, which is Martin Sheen is daddy. So...
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah. How long till any of our big ticket bingo card items come up? Guns, abortion, free speech, religion. I mean, the numbers moment with Ghost Mrs. Landingham.
Yeah, just gave us all the issues.
When she was like, you know what you need to do, Jed, you got to give people the numbers. And then he just goes through this all these amazing statistics about America at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah.
There is work left to do here.
Yeah. That's his campaign speech.
Yeah.
What he does to Mrs. Landingham in the Oval Office. Gorgeous, incredible.
Yeah.
Which leads me on to best writerly moment, just the whole episode.
But also, CJ Cregg, please, I can only answer 14 or 15 questions at once.
Yeah, no, that's gorgeous. It's going to be, for me, a tie between Jed's monologue in the church and then Dolores Landingham's, you don't have a sister.
And you need one.
Please. Man, I feel like a man.
Don't talk like that here. I don't care whose nephew you are.
Yeah.
And then also, obviously, Josh is insane. I'd sooner have my family take their clothes off and dance the tarantella on the Truman balcony than go through the campaign with this around my neck. Why are you talking about Stockard taking her clothes off? Why is that the forefront of your mind?
Why are we talking about the whole family take the clothes off? It's not that I don't like that. My punt for Man, I Feel Like a Man was she was a real dame, old friend, real broad.
Yeah. I saw that you'd put that in there, and that is the true winner, I think, for me this week. Yeah, for sure.
Real dame, a real broad. I obviously put in Mrs. Landingham's You Never Had a Big Sister as my girl, I feel like a girl.
But it's also my proudest to be an American moment, I think.
Yeah. I love you're a foot smarter than the smartest kids in the class.
Yeah.
Because in my heart, I feel like she said that to Charlie.
Yeah. Oh my God. Don't hit me with this in the quick fires. Jesus. My girl, I feel like a girl, again, goes to CJ this week. Okay, seeing as this is going to be kind of a light day, I'm thinking blow off work, maybe some shopping or something.
And Leigh, the moment that made you proudest to be an American?
That monologue from everything that came out of Mrs. Landingham's mouth, young and old, but specifically the because you never had a big sister monologue.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just dire straits, soaking wet Jed Bartlet, hands in his motherfucking pockets. Let's go, season 3. So some discussion points.
Yes, Mrs. Landingham's husband, why so absent? Is he already dead in the flashback?
So my theory is that Mrs. Landingham's husband was like a working man.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a working gal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he had to travel a lot for his job. I just get the sense that he had to travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Because we know he was still alive when her sons died at Vietnam, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
And then I'm going to go deep. Leigh.
Okay.
I think when the twins died, he never came back from that.
Yeah, I think he died of a broken heart.
Yeah, and I think that his health kind of declined and there wasn't really any one thing. But he retired, and I think Dolores was like, well, I'm going to keep working. Like, I'm going to keep busy. Like, I'm not interested in being an old woman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a working lady.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he just aged very quickly. And I think that maybe within 5 years he died.
Yeah.
So I think he's absent in flashback because I think she's like, I'm not just someone's wife.
Yes.
But I am Mrs. Landingham.
Yes.
And then I think he's been absent. I think the whole time we've known adult Mrs. Landingham, he has been deceased.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which leads us on to discussion point number 2.
How did Mrs. Landingham come to work for Jed after working for his dad?
Have you got any thoughts on this?
My thought is that Jed went off to university. She continued working at the school while he was at university. Then when he became like a plucky young upstart post leaving university, he needed a secretary and he was like, hey, I need that big sister. You're right. Come and work for me.
That he poached from his dad.
I think it was a confluence of like when he was ready and in a position to start having a secretary, I think his dad was retiring. And he was like, you will not do Mrs. Landingham dirty. Like, she will not be jobless as a result of your retirement.
Stunning. I'd love to offer you this.
Yeah.
Which is, Jed's graduated, flying colours, obviously. He's done his postgrad. He's got a really great position. He's doing his like economics stuff. And he's in the position where he needs to have his first secretary. Now, who would he ask for advice? Dolores, clearly.
Of course.
So he would make a phone call or perhaps write a letter and be like, I'm hiring my first secretary and I'd just like you to, I'd love to pick your brains essentially about what you think criteria for that job would be, pay grade, that sort of thing. So perhaps you could come into the office that I'm working. I think she's still working for his dad. I think his dad's like one of those head teachers that's just never going to retire until they die.
Refuses to retire, yeah.
And I think Jed's just there like working away at his desk. And Mrs. Landingham just like walks into his office and just sits down at the secretary's desk and just starts like unpacking her bag. And he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I could never find you anyone as good as myself. So I guess I'm working for you now.
I would offer that he asked Mrs. Landingham to conduct the interviews for the secretary. And she met with several young women and then decided that none of them were good enough for Jed and she would simply have to take the job herself.
Yes, that's exactly correct. And then Jed's like, oh no, like I don't want there to be any beef with my dad. And I think she's like, well, what are you afraid of? I quit the job. It's got nothing to do with you. And he's like, but obviously my dad's crazy. And she's like, well, why don't you talk to him about it then? And Jed's like, well, I wouldn't be doing that.
He's a sad old man.
Yeah. Now, the next point that you've put down, Leigh, is very interesting.
Did Jed know Mrs. Landingham's sons? What age are they in the flashback that we are seeing? I guess Mrs. Landingham's sons must have been younger than Jed.
the age that she's giving in the flashbacks is that she has like children of 4 or 5 years old.
I wonder if she like quit her career until the twins went to school. And this is her like first job back.
Yes.
Now that the boys are like in elementary school.
That reads for me. Now, did Jed know Mrs. Landingham's sons? I don't think he knew them personally because I think she would have made a very clear boundary between her working life and her home life.
I see that for sure. Yeah.
So I think
definitely.
It was things like, as Jed got older, like he would send family Christmas cards to the Landinghams. But I think he would like send his regards.
And he would know their names.
Know their names and
would
be like,
write their names into the card.
And would be like, oh, how is so-and-so doing after their first semester at college?
I feel like, yeah, he would offer to put them in, because they were both doctors, weren't they? I think he would offer to say, you know, if Abby can ever offer any advice to the boys, she would be more than happy to. But I feel like Mrs. Landingham was like, no, we do not take handouts. You will not be taking Jed up on that.
Yeah. And then another topic of discussion, which I am thrilled that you've brought up because I think I've cracked this.
Okay, Jed's mother. Discuss.
So I think she died when Jed was young.
Ooh.
So I think Jed is one of 3 brothers and he's the oldest.
We've definitely found out Jed is the eldest.
So I think, first of all, I think there's age gap between him and the rest of his siblings. I think it was like Jed was born and then like no kids were coming along. And then I think when Jed was like 5 or 6.
Interesting.
Then it was like
bam,
18 months between the other 3.
Yeah.
You know, like baby, 18 months later, another baby, 18 months later, another baby. Irish triplets.
I could see, thank you for that. I could see a death in childbirth.
I could see a death in childbirth. Wow, you know when you catch yourself saying something and you're like, this is insane. I could see a death in childbirth. I could also see like a back in, I mean, what year? Are we talking like 50s?
Yeah.
Like 1950s? Then like perhaps like a very aggressive short-term breast cancer?
Totally. Yeah.
And like them just like, there would have been no knowing. It would just have been like, she went to the doctors and had a test and they were like, you're going to die in 2 days.
I mean, if we're going to put Jed at like 60.
Yes.
At this point. So if he's 60 in like 2000.
Yeah.
Then he was born in 1940. So by the time we're meeting him at secondary school, it's like 19. He's probably like 16 here.
I'd say 16, yeah.
So we're in like 1956.
Yeah. So I think it was like or it could have been like a women's reproductive health problem.
Yeah.
Like after the birth, like she got an infection. There was like something that never was really dealt with.
Not like my granddad's mum who died because she tried to walk to the church. Yeah, she tried to walk to the church to get churched after having a baby and had septicemia and collapsed. It's a very dark story to bring up at the end of an episode.
Hey, I mean, we're discussing when we think a fictional person's mother died. So I think the reason why Jed's father is so vile is I think that he was like, oh, for all of her Catholicism, for all of her devoutness, she still just ended up being dead anyway.
Yeah. I think he's never recovered from, she was, I think, the warmer, the more caring parent. And he never recovered from the loss of that warmth in the home. Yeah. And he doesn't know how to emotionally communicate with his kids. And he was always kind of counting on her to do that. And now she's not there. And I think he just became a bitter, bitter man after his wife died.
I just think there's a part of me that's a man of that generation would never consider raising children to be his job. He's providing. So his wife would raise the children. And now he finds himself with 4 children and he's like, well, that's none of my business. Yeah. And I think Jed looks like his mother. I think the other 3 Bartlets all look like a mixture or more like him.
They all look like Lawrence O'Donnell.
Again, not to bring her into this, but it's very like, he has his mother's eyes.
See, the thing is, I feel like the reason that we keep getting reminded of Harry Potter through this series, despite she who should not be named, is because two people who love Latin, Jed Bartlet and J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
He like almost says the Cruciatus curse in that prayer at one point.
Yeah.
Just two people who love Latin.
But I just feel like Lawrence is there. He's angry. And like every time he's disappointed in his son, he like looks at him and he's like, I just see my wife's eyes looking back at me.
Devastating. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's giving that level of rage, for sure.
Do you know what I mean? And it's, like truly emotionally constipated man.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for a long time, even without a study session. So I think we should wrap this up here. But
because we can get into these things in the next
episode, we're going to wrap up season 2. We're going to answer some listener patron questions. And we're going to talk about where we go from here into season 3. So very much looking forward to recording the next ep. Love you so much. Love to all of our listeners. We're queergalswatch@gmail.com if you want to send us an email. Queergalswatch, wherever you get your socials. We love hearing from you. As I say, there's some very fun things going on in our Patreon with our kind of gut reactions to each episode. And we are very much hoping to be back for season 3. We would love to do season 3. And everyone who joins our Patreon gets us a step closer to that being a reality.
Being able to do that, yeah. I've had an enormous amount of fun discussing Two Cathedrals.
Yeah, it's a highlight for me, for sure.
There's been highs, there's been lows. I've laughed and I've cried.
Yeah.
Okay, I will see you next week, Leigh, for our season 2 town hall.
Can't believe we're here already.
No. Have a gorgeous week.
You too.
I might just go and weep about all the fictional storylines that I've created for people who aren't real.
Sounds good.
Great. Bye.
Bye.